Hi guys. Right, well we've had a delay getting to this point, but at last, the track is running, points are throwing, and I'm ready to get some basic shape to the landscape. But before we get to that, I thought I would make sure everything else is ready to rock and roll. The first thing to think about is operation. It's one thing running a light engine around to test, but as soon as I got a couple of coaches on the back, it dawned on me that I haven't yet sorted out auto uncoupling. These are nanomagnets. But don't let their size fool you, or the fact they're off Temu for that matter. These things pack a punch. They're only about 5mm wide and about a mil or two deep, so they pretty much slot in between the sleepers. So with magnets in hand, well actually they're currently stuck to the metal ruler, I need to decide on the location for them. As it's a terminus with a runaround loop, the most commonly used spot to uncouple is the top end of the loop. And as I measured the white marker for the limit of shunt in the loop, and marked it on the layout, that's an easy one to get correct. So I'll bring a train to the marked area, because it's fun for me, and to test clearance. The magnet between the sleepers is a bit too tight, so I'll slice a slither of sleeper off the two that cuddle the magnet. The crab's here for not only moral support because I'm a mess, but to offer up his wares in the form of cocktail sticks. Being wood, these aren't magnetic, so they're ideal to push the magnet down onto the blob of superglue on the cork. And there you go. We will now test our new feature. So the train comes in, and with a very slight reverse to loosen the slack between the couplings, the magnet pulls down on the Greenwich coupling, thus releasing the loop. The engine can now pull away, leaving its train in the station. Textbook train work. In reality, it's just about the only location in the area that I can find being used on the railway to uncouple. Well, that and the siding at the back, but that's had the same wagon sitting there for as long as I can remember. But since it's a siding, I thought I'd add one there anyway. So, in the spirit of diversity, our model for this test is Skarloey from my Skarloey Challenge build last year. So it's run into the point, and I've thrown it to give the road for the siding. Skarloey then reverses back into the point, and over the magnet. Physics wizardry happens, and Skarloey can make a clean getaway. Job done. The other job that needs to be done here before I can start the landscaping is fixing down any rogue wires at the back of the layout. These are flopping about because I left them longer to have enough slack to pull them through the bottom of the layout, which I've done and forgot to film. Anyway, all of that can be glued down, so I'm using Bostik all-purpose glue to set the jock blocks down. These being glued into position should be enough to hold all the wires in place. Right, well, you see that I used that compact foam foil covered stuff for the bottom half of the hillside, and I did plan to use the same for the top half. However, since then I've acquired absolutely loads of nice flat sheets of polystyrene. And since I haven't had a good go with my hot wire foam cutter yet, this was a good opportunity to make that a reality. And look how long they are. Whoop. So I'll build the landscape up sheet by sheet, and to start it all off, I'll roughly mark out the position of the track on the bottom one. The wire cutter is plugged in and ready to roll, so it's just a matter of following my plotted route. Okay, well the first thing to note here is that the cutter can't actually reach the plotted route in one hit, so I'll need to cut a slice off first. Which will then allow me to reach it. I like using this. It's restored my faith in polystyrene. No mess at all, and it's really easy to use. I love it. With the first sheet cut, I use that to mark the second sheet. Obviously the landscape is going to go back on an angle as it gets higher up the bank, but getting them somewhere near should help picture what I need to cut. That's the first half of the layout stacked out. And at this point I wasn't sure how high the bank would get before hitting the back scene, so it's all a bit of a guessing game. Happy with that, each piece now needs to be glued down, and PVA seems to be the logical choice here. it won't eat at the foam, it's cheaper than fancy glues, and when dry it should hold strong. I'll spread it evenly on the underside of the first sheet like it's a massive hot dog. And yes, I too was impressed with my glue skills here. This then gets pushed down onto the cork base, and the process is repeated over and over again until I have a nice big sticky hill. To aid adhesion as the PVA dries, I'm sitting some of my more heavy, non-sponsored products on top. Thanks Woodland Scenics, WWS Scenics, and, well, whoever makes that polyfiller. I did the same thing for the other half of the layout, and as it was drying, I was sitting looking at it, and something looked off. The path leaving the platform for the quarry really looked wide, so I measured it again, and it was wide. Whilst it was originally correct, when it came to laying the track, I actually moved it across the cork base to allow more scenery at the front of the layout, without thinking about the platform area that I'd already cut the boards for. This was going to be an issue, until I realised that cutting it now is no different to before, since the foam below is soft and won't make a mess of the jigsaw. So I marked it all out again against the permanent track layout, and this looked much more like the prototype. Once again, my borrowed jigsaw comes to the rescue. The only thing I'm cautious of here is actually hitting the track, which I didn't do, so, well, it's all okay again. And because of all that time hoovering the sawdust, the PVA is now dry. Oh yeah, it's all coming together. Now, I thought cutting a hillside was going to be an easy thing, but it wasn't, for two reasons. The first is that I didn't realise that when you stand at the real location, you can see every last bump in the hillside. But when you look again on photos at home, it's not so easy, as it's now a 2D picture. You can't easily gauge the size of areas, angles or depth. This led to an impromptu second trip to Nanguernle over the weekend to take yet more photos, and to try to make a mental note of any more obvious land formations. The second issue, which really is a subnote of the first issue, is that I like to model as close as possible to what's actually there. So I'm not really having a very good day here because I'm actually struggling to make it look like Nanguernle, and not just some generic mountainside. Obviously it's fine if that's the type of thing you like to do, but for me, that's the type of thing that will annoy me for centuries to come. Because of this, I've actually spent many days cutting this foam, and even now I'm not 100% happy. The beauty of the foam cutter though is that I can just keep fiddling with it until I'm happy, so it's really not much effort to do so. That's the top half cut, and you can see the start of the incline on the left. Areas where I need to add rock, general height, which is good actually because I want this layout to give a good feeling of space as the landscape absolutely dominates the little railway. I'll move down to the bottom section, and a change of tool is needed because the hot cutter won't cut this foam. Not to worry, because I have kitchen utensils. The shape is also much easier to get right, as there's less of it. Most of the platform is still up on a retaining wall, and anything left is just, well, a bank. Luckily, I took loads of photos of this area from across the ravine at the weekend, so I actually began to enjoy myself. And the best part is, because I moved the position of the track bed, it's now given scope to model the part of the stream I was originally intending, which made me really happy, because I like modelling streams. It'll only be on the left hand side, but when you look at the bird's eye picture that I made, you can see that it makes sense anyway. This is the beauty of modelling prototype. When you get parts correct, other parts will fall into place. To cut this area, I basically looked down on the photo and then cut directly down on the layout in the same place. This gave the location of the stream. Then I could go in from the side, using the new photos from the weekend to get it looking correct from the front. Then I worked my way along the front of the layout, following the photos as a guide until I had something that looks a little bit like Nagwernal. So, after an intense hoovering session, and 2 bin bags full of off-cut foam pieces removed from the room, the station is sitting on a landscape. One thing I was surprised at was the lack of hillside above the station. I was fully expecting it to go right up to the top of the back scene, but there we go. This, well, and the 2 ends at the front, need a new back scene to show the woodland, not just sky. I'm not actually sure how I'll do this yet, as the area is covered in trees, and I can't have trees on the back scene or it'll be impossible to blend it into the sky above. So if you have any ideas how I can do this, and don't say paint it, because I need photorealism here please, do get in touch, I'd really appreciate it. That's it. Cheers.